She put the plate on the floor, like I was a dog. My son watched, silent, while I stood in the mansion my life savings bought. They thought the old teacher was finished. They were about to get a history lesson on consequences. If this story finds you, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Let me back up and tell you how I, Arthur Jenkins, ended up staring at that cold marble floor. The smell hit me first. Roasted turkey, expensive wine, and something sickly sweet, like pine candles trying too hard to cover the stench of pretense. It was Thanksgiving. I stood on the doorstep of my son's new mansion. It was all glass and stone, cold, huge. The kind of house you buy to show off, not to live in. It was also the house I paid for. I taught history for 40 years. I know how empires rise. I know how they fall. I just never thought the empire I'd be watching crumble would be my own family. My wife, Eleanor, wasn't with me. Alzheimer's was stealing her, piece by piece. She needed specialized care, the kind that eats a pension whole. This dinner was supposed to be a break, a moment with my son Brian and his wife Chloe. I just wanted a slice of normal. I was about to find out normal was gone forever. I held a bottle of Merlot, mid-range, all I could afford now, and a pumpkin pie from the bakery. My hands felt old, clumsy. I rubbed the faint chalk dust that never seemed to leave my knuckles, a nervous habit. The imported Italian lights glared at me. Bright and judgmental, I was about to knock, but I never got the chance. The heavy oak door swung open. Chloe stood there, glittering. She wore a gold sequin dress that probably cost more than 2 months of Eleanor's care. Her smile was painted on, tight, fake. "Arthur, you're late." She didn't move to let me in. She blocked the doorway. The noise of a party spilled out behind her. Clinking glasses, fake laughter, a jazz trio playing softly. It sounded expensive and very, very cold. "Traffic was bad, Chloe. It's a holiday." I tried to keep my voice steady, patient, the tone I used for unruly students. "Happy Thanksgiving." I held out the pie and the wine. She looked at them like I'd handed her garbage. "We don't need that, Arthur," she sniffed. She tapped her long red fingernails on the doorframe. Tap, tap, tap. "Everything is catered. Chef Pierre is here." She waved a hand toward the noise. And honestly, the guest list expanded. Important people, business connections. A cold dread started in my stomach. I spoke to Brian on Tuesday. He invited me. "Brian doesn't handle the logistics," she snapped. Her patience was already gone. "He thinks with his heart." Sweet but useless when hosting an event of this caliber. Caliber. It was Thanksgiving, not a summit. She sighed, loud and dramatic. "I didn't account for you with the event planner." "The event planner? I thought it was a family dinner." I was wrong. "It's Thanksgiving, Chloe, not a corporate merger," I said, keeping my voice low. I was wrong. "It's Thanksgiving, Chloe, not a corporate merger," I said, keeping my voice low. "In our circles, Arthur, they're the same thing." She looked me up and down, my worn coat, my sensible shoes. I didn't fit her image. "The point is, there is no room, not at the main table. Not at the secondary table. We are full. Full." The word landed like a punch to the gut. But the real betrayal was just getting warmed up. Brian appeared from the crowd, champagne glass in his hand. His cheeks were red. His eyes were slightly glazed. He looked expensive, polished, and completely empty. "Dad, hey, you made it." He leaned in for a quick, awkward hug. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. What's going on?" He knew exactly what was going on. "There's no room, Brian," Chloe repeated, her voice like ice. "And frankly, we're stretching the catering budget. Chef Pierre charges per head. Per head. Like I was cattle." My blood began to simmer. I looked past them into the dining room. A massive mahogany table, stretched forever. At least 20 strangers with perfect teeth were laughing. A feast sat in the middle. They were sitting at the table I bought. "Brian?" I asked. My voice was quiet. A plea. A father to a son. He looked at the floor. Then at his wife. Then back at me. I saw the shame in his eyes. A flicker. Then Chloe glared at him and the flicker died. "It's complicated, Dad," he mumbled. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He fiddled with his expensive cufflinks. A nervous tick. "Chloe's right. It's packed. We had the Hendersons confirm last minute." The Hendersons. The important contact. The humiliation burned, hot and acidic in my throat. I was being turned away, dismissed. But what happened next wasn't just an insult. It was an execution. Chloe sighed dramatically, like I was a beggar asking for her last dime. Fine. Wait here. She disappeared. I waited. The jazz music felt mocking now. Brian stood there, swirling his champagne, saying nothing. He stared intensely at a sculpture of twisted metal near the door. The silence stretched, with the silence of betrayal. Chloe returned. Not with a chair. She held a flimsy, white plastic plate, the cheap kind you buy for a barbecue. She had scraped some appetizers onto it from a side table, a few cold shrimp, a smear of wilted spinach dip, a cracked cracker. Here, she said, thrusting the plate toward me. But she didn't hand it to me. That would have been too kind. She walked past me, down the marble hallway toward the kitchen. Her heels clicked sharply on the stone. Click, click, click. Every sound was a nail in my coffin. She stopped near the laundry room door, next to the service entrance, the place where the help came and went. I watched her confused. What was she doing? Then she did it. She paused, looked back at me, a cruel little smile playing on her lip. The hallway light caught the sequins on her dress. The silence was deafening. Brian watched from the end of the hall, frozen. With a deliberate, calculated motion, she bent down. She placed the plastic plate on the hardwood floor. The quiet sound of plastic on wood echoed louder than a gunshot. "You can eat here, Arthur," she said. She gestured to the floor like I was the family dog. "Just stay out of the way of the servers. They're busy." "They're busy." Time stopped. The jazz band faded. All I heard was the blood rushing in my ears. The frantic pounding of my own heart. My throat burned. For a second I forgot how to breathe. The woman whose entire lifestyle I funded had just told me to eat scraps off her floor. I looked at Brian, my son. He saw the plate. He saw me. Shame and fear fought on his face. But he said nothing. He did nothing. He just turned away. He couldn't watch the humiliation he allowed. My own blood. He let it happen. That silence cut deeper than any word. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep. The betrayal too absolute. I walked slowly back to the console table in the entryway. I carefully placed the pumpkin pie and the Merlot next to that ugly metal sculpture. I turned around. I walked out the front door. I closed it softly behind me. The click of the latch was the sound of a door locking forever. The cold air felt clean against my burning face, a sharp contrast to the suffocating air of greed I had just escaped. I wasn't just leaving a party. I was leaving my family. The drive back to my small rented apartment was a blur. Taillights swam in front of me. The silence in my car was heavy, broken only by the clicking of the turn signal. It hadn't always been like this. Brian was a good kid, bright, ambitious, maybe too eager to please. But Chloe was a shark in a designer dress, and she smelled blood in the water. My blood. I thought back to how this all started. How I let them build this empire on my dime. It started with a plea and a lie. 6 months earlier, Brian came to me. He sat in my cramped living room, looking desperate. His eyes darted around like he was afraid my poverty might be contagious. His tech startup, the one he always claimed was on the verge of greatness. It was struggling. "We need cash, Dad," he pleaded. "A massive injection. To secure a new contract. But that wasn't the real reason. And we need a house, Dad. In this neighborhood, the exclusive one. It's an investment," he'd insisted. "We need to look successful, to be successful. Chloe says the right address changes everything. It opens doors, the doors I was now shut out of. I loved my son. He was all I had left of the family. Eleanor and I built, and I was terrified about Eleanor's future. Her care at Whispering Oaks was expensive. The best facility in the state, $10,000 a month. I knew my pension wouldn't cover it forever. If Brian's business took off, he promised he would take care of us. He promised lies. He always fiddled with his cuffs when he lied. So I did the unthinkable. I liquidated my retirement accounts. 40 years of teaching history. Gone. It was nearly $400,000. I handed over my future. trusting my son to protect it. I signed the papers. The ink felt like blood. I was signing away my safety net. For him, I was a fool, a trusting, loving fool. And they saw me coming a mile away. The first crack appeared almost immediately. The money transferred on a Monday. By Friday, they were different people. The promised weekly dinners became monthly phone calls, then brief, distracted texts. Too busy networking, Dad. The message was clear. I no longer fit. I was the past. They were the future, and their future was built on my sacrifice. Then came the insults. Small cuts. Erosions of my dignity. I visited their new mansion for the first time. I was treated not as the man who paid for it, but as a clumsy intruder. It started with a coaster. I set my water glass on the coffee table. A drop of condensation rolled down the side. Chloe stared at it. Her hand twitched. The room went too quiet. She rushed over, snatching the glass away, her eyes blazing with fury. This table is antique Italian marble. Arthur, she hissed. Do you realize how easily it stains? She wiped the spot vigorously, glaring at me. Maybe it's better if you drink in the kitchen. My throat burned as I swallowed hard. I wasn't going to let her see me break. I stood up and walked into the sterile, industrial-sized kitchen. Alone, I was a liability in the house I bought. The pressure increased when the bills for Eleanor's care started arriving. $10,000 every month. Like clockwork. Chloe called me one afternoon. Arthur, these bills are astronomical, she said. No greeting, just the attack. $10,000 a month. It's unsustainable. We can't keep hemorrhaging money like this. Hemorrhaging. My money. I am covering it with my pension, Chloe. I reminded her, my voice tight, barely. And what happens when the costs go up? Which they will, she retorted. She paused. I heard her tapping her nails on her desk. Tap, tap. Perhaps you should consider a state-run facility. They are perfectly adequate. Adequate. A word that meant crowded hallways. Overworked staff. The smell of urine and despair. I will never put Eleanor in a place like that, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She deserves dignity. Dignity is expensive, Arthur, Chloe snapped. And frankly, we have our own lives to worry about. The lives I paid for. I realized then they didn't see Eleanor as a person. They saw her as a liability. The final straw before Thanksgiving was subtle, but devastating. I called Brian. My heart was light. I had good news. Eleanor had a breakthrough. She looked at me, really looked at me. Arthur, she had whispered. She remembered my name. 5 full minutes of clarity in the fog. I needed to share it with my son. Brian answered on the 3rd ring. He sounded rushed, annoyed. That's great, Dad. Really? That's wonderful. His voice was distracted. Impatient. Listen, Dad, I'm happy for you. But I'm late for a squash game with Henderson. Important contact. Can we talk later? A squash game. More important than his mother's memory. He hung up before I could reply. He never called back. He wasn't just avoiding me. He was erasing me. And tonight, on the floor with a plastic plate, the erasure was complete. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just unwanted. I was despised, and I had paid for the privilege. The silence in my apartment was heavier than the darkness. I sat in the armchair. The one piece of furniture I salvaged from the home Eleanor and I shared for 30 years. I looked at the framed photo on my bedside table. Eleanor and me. Our 25th anniversary, dancing, her eyes bright, full of life. The disease had stolen that, and Brian and Chloe had stolen the rest. I touched the glass of the photo, cold beneath my fingertips. I'm so sorry, Elle, I whispered. The apology caught in my throat. I failed you. The weight of the betrayal crushed me. I felt old, tired, utterly alone. Tears finally came, hot and angry. I had allowed this to happen. I was so desperate for scraps of affection, so afraid of losing Brian completely. I ignored the red flags. All of them. A memory sparked in the darkness. Sharp and vivid. Brian was 10, struggling with his history project, a diorama of the Roman Empire. It kept falling apart. I can't do it, Dad. It's too hard. I sat beside him, picked up a piece of painted cardboard. History isn't just about dates and battles, Brian, I told him. It's about consequences. Every action has a reaction. The Romans expanded too quickly, I continued. Their infrastructure couldn't support the weight. Their moral foundation crumbled. If the foundation is weak, the empire falls. The echo of my own voice resonated in the silence. Consequences. Brian had forgotten the lesson, and his empire, built on greed and deception, was about to fall. The exhaustion drained away, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. 40 years of teaching history taught me about strategy, about power dynamics, about finding the weak points in a fortress. I wasn't just a helpless old man. I was a historian, and it was time to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I turned on my computer. Heartbreak turned to strategy. I didn't sleep that night. Adrenaline coursed through me. I pulled up the bank statements, the initial transfer, $400,000. Then I located the loan agreement, the one my lawyer friend David Chen had insisted upon. David Chen, sharp man, cautious. We played chess every Tuesday. He always thought 5 moves ahead. He wore bow ties and never missed a detail. Never give that amount of money without a formal agreement, Arthur, David had warned me. Family or not, especially not family. I had ignored him, blinded by love. Now his words felt prophetic. The loan agreement was key. It wasn't a gift. It was a formal, interest-bearing loan, and it had a specific clause. The funds were to be used exclusively for capital investment in Brian's startup. Now I needed to prove they violated it, and I knew exactly how. I started digging. Public records, tax filings, incorporation documents. It didn't take long to find the first crack. The startup was a shell. The new contract Brian boasted about. It didn't exist. The company was barely making payroll, heavily leveraged with bank loans taken out long before my incident. But that wasn't the worst part. I cross-referenced the dates. The money trail, the $400,000, never touched the business account. It was diverted directly into Brian and Chloe's personal account and used, almost immediately, as the down payment for the mansion. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They hadn't invested in the business. They had invested in their image. They used my sacrifice, Eleanor's future, to fund their lavish lifestyle. It was fraud, clear, calculated fraud. The betrayal cut deeper. They weren't just ungrateful. They were thieves. The rage was cold now. Focused. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to win. But I needed more proof. I needed to know how deep the lie went. The public records only told half the story. I needed an insider. I remembered Brian mentioning an assistant. Her name was Sarah Peterson. She was fired a few months ago. Chloe said she was incompetent and lazy. Chloe's insults were usually projections of her own flaws. Maybe Sarah wasn't incompetent. Maybe she was honest. I found her on LinkedIn. Her profile said she was seeking new opportunities. Her picture looked kind, young, ambitious. I sent her a message. Simple, direct. Sarah, my name is Arthur Jenkins, Brian's father. I need to talk to you about his business. I believe I was defrauded. I waited. My heart hammered in my chest. This was a gamble, she replied within an hour. Mr. Jenkins, I was wondering when you would call. We can meet tomorrow. Coffee shop on 4th Street, 10 a.m. She didn't sound surprised. She sounded ready. The next morning was Black Friday. The irony wasn't lost on me. I met Sarah at the coffee shop. She looked tired, nervous. She kept glancing at the door, as if expecting Chloe to burst in. She clutched a worn leather binder like a shield. Thank you for meeting me, Sarah, I said, buying her a coffee. I shouldn't be talking to you, she whispered, stirring her latte obsessively. Chloe made me sign an NDA, a very strict one. She threatened to ruin my career if I ever spoke about the company. I'm not asking you to violate it, I said gently, using my teacher voice again. I just need to understand the business. Sarah laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. What business? There is no business, Mr. Jenkins. She took a deep breath and opened the binder. Inside were printouts, emails, financial statements, logs. It was a meticulous record of their deceit. She laid it all out. The fake clients, the inflated revenue projections, the constant borrowing to cover the payroll, and Chloe's expenses. Brian is good at selling the idea of the company, Sarah said, her voice shaking with anger. But there's nothing behind it. No product. No contracts. It's all smoke and mirrors. Then where did the money go? And I asked, even though I already knew. Chloe? Sarah spat the name like venom. She controlled everything. The finances, the image. She used the business account as her personal piggy bank. It'd design our clothes, expensive trips, the catering for the parties. She pointed to a line item, $5,000 for a handbag, listed as office supplies. The day your money came in, Sarah continued, she transferred it out within hours. I have the logs. She bought the house the next day, and a new Mercedes. She laughed about it, said her investment finally matured. The confirmation hit me hard. It was worse than I thought. The cruelty was casual. Why did she fire you? I asked. Because I asked too many questions, Sarah said. Because I refused to cook the books. I told Brian it was illegal. He told me to get on board or get out. She paused, her eyes filled with tears. And because I caught her meeting with Mr. Henderson, the important contact, the one at the Thanksgiving party. What about Henderson? I asked. My blood ran cold. Sarah leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He isn't just an investor, Mr. Jenkins. He's Chloe's godfather. And he's dangerous. She looked around the coffee shop again. I think they're laundering money through the company. The revelation stunned me. It wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just theft. It was a criminal conspiracy. A federal crime. They hadn't just stolen my retirement. They had implicated me in their illegal activities. My money was the foundation of their criminal enterprise. The stakes just got much higher. I thanked Sarah. I took the binder. The evidence I needed was inside. Heavy. Undeniable. I walked out of the coffee shop. The world looked different now. Sharper. More dangerous. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my freedom. And for Eleanor. If this story is hitting home, drop a like. It was time to call David Chen. I drove straight to David's office. He was working. He took one look at my face and cleared his schedule. I laid out everything. The fraud, the shell company, Sarah's evidence in the binder, the money laundering, Henderson. David listened patiently. He took off his bow tie, a sign he was getting serious. He paced his office, his mind working through the implications. This is bigger than a simple breach of contract, Arthur, he said, his voice grim. This is federal crime territory. RICO charges. Serious jail time. I know, but I need my money back. I need to protect Eleanor, and I don't want to get dragged down with them. We need to act fast, David said, before they realize we know, before they can hide the money, or destroy the evidence. We spent the next few hours devising a strategy, a trap. We couldn't go to the police. Not yet. It would take too long, and Chloe would retaliate against Eleanor. We needed leverage, something they couldn't ignore, something that would force their hand. The banks, David said, snapping his fingers. They financed the rest of the house, the business loans. They are leveraged to the hilt, and banks hate fraud, especially fraud involving money laundering. We activate the demand clause, David said, tapping the loan agreement. We demand immediate repayment, based on the breach of contract. But we don't sue them, he continued. We use the fraud and the money laundering to leverage the bank and the FBI. He explained the strategy. If the bank realized the foundation of their loans was fraudulent and involved criminal activity, they won't just call in the loans, David said. They will freeze their assets, and they will contact the authorities immediately. It's mandatory reporting. It was a brilliant plan. A checkmate in 5 moves. But first I had to protect Eleanor, the one vulnerability they would exploit. I went to Whispering Oaks. I met with the administrator, Mrs. Albright, a compassionate woman with weary eyes. I explained the situation, the potential financial instability, the threat of relocation. I didn't mention the crime, just the financial risk. I paid for the next 3 months of Eleanor's care in advance, using the last remaining emergency funds I had. It drained my account to almost zero. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought me time. Eleanor was safe. Now it was time to attack. David made the calls, plural, one to the bank's risk management department, presenting the evidence of the fraud. The shell company, the diverted funds, one to a contact he had at the FBI's white-collar crime division, presenting the evidence of the money laundering, Henderson. The binder. The response was immediate and devastating. The confrontation happened a week later. I called Brian, requested a meeting at the mansion to discuss the loan. He agreed, his voice tight with anxiety. He knew something was wrong. The ground was shifting beneath his feet, but he had no idea the earthquake was coming. I returned to the mansion. This time I wasn't alone. David was with me, calm, authoritative. Brian and Chloe were in the living room, the atmosphere thick with tension. They looked pale, exhausted. The polished facade was cracking. Mr. Henderson was there too, sitting in an armchair, swirling a glass of whiskey, arrogant, untouchable. The sight of him made my blood boil. "Arthur, if you're here to beg for mercy, it's too late," Chloe snapped. Her voice brittle. She was trying to sound strong, but her hand trembled. "I'm not here to beg, Chloe," I said calmly. "I'm here to discuss the terms of my loan." David stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins, Mr. Henderson, I represent Arthur Jenkins. We are formally demanding the immediate repayment of the $400,000 loan, plus interest, due to a clear violation of the terms." He handed them the formal demand letter. Henderson laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. "A demand letter? Is this a joke? Get this old fool out of here." Chloe snatched the letter, glanced at it, and smirked. "You think this scares us? Go ahead, sue us. We have better lawyers than you can afford. It will take years to get a judgment." Then she played the card she thought would break me, the threat she had held over me for months. Her smile widened, cruel, triumphant. She looked me straight in the eye. The silence in the room was absolute. Brian stared at the floor. "And remember what I said, Arthur," she continued, her voice low and venomous. "If you pursue this, Eleanor goes to the state facility. Tomorrow, we'll let her rot there, alone, confused. And it will be your fault." My heart seized. The image of Eleanor suffering. The cruelty was breathtaking. But this time, I was ready. I looked at her, letting the cold determination burn in my eyes. She thought she had won. She was wrong. "I'm willing to be reasonable," I said, offering them one last chance. The final offer before the trap sprung. If you repay the loan immediately and apologize for the extortion, we can avoid litigation. Chloe's smirk widened. "No, we apologize for nothing. We concede nothing. You made a bad investment, Arthur. Deal with it. Now get out before I call security." I nodded slowly. "Very well. You've made your choice." As we turned to leave, the doorbell rang. The timing was perfect. A courier stood at the door. "Impassive delivery for Brian and Chloe Jenkins," the courier announced. Holding 2 thick envelopes, he handed a third envelope to Henderson. Brian walked to the door, confused. He signed for the delivery. His hand was shaking violently now. He opened the first envelope. His face turned ashy, the color of cold ash. He stumbled back, collapsing onto the sofa. The letter fluttered to the floor. "What is it?" Chloe demanded. Snatching the letter from the floor, she read it, her eyes widening in horror. It wasn't from me. It was from First National Bank. Henderson opened his envelope. His face turned purple with rage. "What did you do?" Brian whispered, looking at me. His voice choked with terror. "I didn't sue you, Brian," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "I simply informed the bank about the fraudulent use of the funds. The bank that holds your mortgage, your business loans." I paused, letting the words sink in, and I informed the FBI about the money laundering. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was Casey's ragged breathing. David explained, his voice calm and lethal. "When the bank realized that the down payment for this house was obtained fraudulently, and that the business was a shell corporation involved in illegal activities. They deemed your loans high risk. He paused. They have frozen your assets, personal and business, and initiated immediate foreclosure proceedings. Furthermore, David continued, looking at Henderson, the FBI has opened a formal investigation into the money laundering allegations. They have frozen your accounts as well, Mr. Henderson. I suggest you call your lawyer. Henderson stood up, his face red with rage. You little worm, he spat at me. You think you can mess with me? I will crush you. He stormed out. The sound of his expensive car screeching down the driveway echoed in the silence. He was running. But he couldn't hide. Chloe stared at the letter, her mouth opening and closing silently. The color drained from her face, a mask of disbelief and despair. The empire was collapsing. The foundation crumbled. You can't do this, she finally screamed, her voice cracking. This is our house, our life. We'll be ruined. No, I corrected her, looking around the cavernous, empty room. This was my life savings, my retirement, my wife's future. You stole it. I walked closer to her. The woman who put a plate on the floor for me. You humiliated me. You threatened the woman I love. You tried to erase me. You thought I was weak. You were wrong. I looked at my son, the boy I taught about history, about consequences. He was weeping now, his head in his hands, the weight of his choices finally crushing him. History is about cause and effect, Brian, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of the moment. And these are the consequences of your actions. I walked out of the house, leaving them standing in the ruins of their stolen empire. The silence broken only by the sound of Chloe's hysterical screams and Brian's broken sobs. The fallout was swift, brutal. The bank moved with ruthless efficiency. They didn't care about the family drama. They cared about their money. The foreclosure process was fast. The auction was a public spectacle, their humiliation broadcast for the world to see. The mansion sold at a significant loss. Their reputation was shattered. The important people they entertained on Thanksgiving disappeared overnight. The FBI investigation was even faster. Henderson was arrested a week later, at the airport, trying to flee the country, charged with money laundering and conspiracy. He took a plea deal and implicated Brian and Chloe to save himself. Sarah Peterson testified against them. Her NDA was voided due to the criminal nature of the case. She spoke with clarity and courage. The binder was the final nail in their coffin. Brian and Chloe avoided serious jail time. Barely. They received probation, massive fines, and a criminal record that would follow them forever. They were left with nothing: debt, regret, and the ashes of the life they stole. The bank seized most of the proceeds from the sale. But David was a shark. He negotiated fiercely. I was able to secure a significant portion of my original loan. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough to ensure Eleanor's care for the rest of her life. Enough to reclaim my dignity. Brian and Chloe's marriage, built on greed and ambition, crumbled. They divorced. They blamed each other for the disaster. They never learned the lesson. I moved Eleanor to a new, state-of-the-art memory care facility, closer to my new apartment. It was bright, peaceful. The staff treated her with kindness and respect. I hired Sarah Peterson to manage my finances. She was smart, honest, and loyal. She deserved a second chance. Brian called me once, months later. He sounded broken, the arrogance gone, replaced by a profound weariness. He was working a low-level sales job, living in a small, cramped apartment, the kind he used to mock. He apologized, a hollow, desperate apology. I lost everything, Dad, he whispered. You lost money and status, Brian, I replied, the sadness in my voice tinged with the hardness of earned wisdom. I lost my son. I paused. I hope one day you understand the difference. I hung up, the silence stretching between us. The chasm, too wide to bridge, maybe forever. The past cannot be changed. But the future was mine to shape. It's Thanksgiving again, 1 year later. The air is crisp, the sky a brilliant blue. I'm not surrounded by wealth and excess. No glass mansions. No jazz trios. I'm sitting beside Eleanor, in the dining room of her new facility. The room is filled with warmth. The smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey. Comforting. Familiar. The food is simple. Turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, served on sturdy ceramic plates, not plastic. Eleanor looks at me, her eyes cloudy but calm. The disease has progressed. The moments of clarity fewer. She rarely speaks now, but as I help her with her fork, she touches my hand. Her fingers frail against my skin. "Ether," she whispers, her voice soft as a falling leaf. A rare, precious moment of recognition. Tears well up in my eyes, blurring the edges of the room. "I'm here, Luke. I'm right here. I've got you. I didn't get revenge. I got justice. I lost the illusion of a happy family, the fantasy of a grateful son. But I regained my dignity, my self-respect, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing I protected the woman I love." I look around the room at the other families sharing this simple meal. There is love here, and respect, and kindness. The simple virtues that Brian and Chloe despise. And as I sit with Eleanor, holding her hand, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, I know I am finally home. The empire fell. The facade crumbled, but the heart endured. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Thanks for listening. Please rate our story in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means a lot, because your time matters.